Welcome. You've got mail. File's done. Goodbye.
I get a very weird sense of anxiety when I hear those sounds.
Yeah.
I bet you there are people listening that are so young that have no idea what that was.
And they thought that the podcast was broken.
Or, their phone's making a phone call or something. Welcome to While She's Napping. I am Adam.
And I'm Cindy.
And we're going to celebrate probably the greatest decade ever, but we're pretty biased. Right?
Yeah. We've only lived through 3 decades.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking like 2000, even though like it's 2020, like from 2000 to 2020 is just like lumped together.
Right. They don't feel like two
different
separate decades within those 20 years.
Because they're not like, you can't really differentiate things in between them. Like the jump between 1990 and 2000 was like 0 to 100, whereas 2000 to 2010 to 2020 is like, incremental improvements.
Right. And things that were from the 90s, it's like, that's a very 90s thing, or like, that's so 90s, like those kinds of decades. And I think you can say that about some of like the 80s, the 70s, you can pinpoint and say that's a very 90s or 80s thing, but I don't feel like you can really do that with the 2000s, and 2010s.
Polar Seltzer. What is this? Polar Seltzer Aid.
Blueberry lemonade. We're both washing down some PB&J sandwiches that we
I
had.
didn't have J.
What'd you? Oh, you just had peanut butter?
Just peanut butter.
Yeah, we were missing
that
made
excess sugar.
It made me miss the fluff. We were talking about how that was a 90s thing, but I mean, fluff is still around.
I've never had fluff.
That's so weird. I know peanut butter and fluff was kind of like the go-to staple, but I used to do all 3.
How is that possible? No. Well, peanut butter and jelly is the go-to
No.
staple.
I mean, in regards to fluff specifically, it was peanut butter and fluff.
Yeah, no one has a fluff
It was
sandwich.
Peanut butter and fluff. That's not what I meant. It'd be peanut butter and fluff or peanut butter and jelly. I did all 3. Peanut butter, jelly, and fluff.
I bet you there are people that had fluff sandwiches.
Yeah, probably.
Like, we're out of peanut butter. Fuck it.
Yep.
Just marshmallow and bread.
Yep.
Liquidated marshmallow and bread. It just, all right, so I remember I went to like day camp when I was a kid, and they had peanut butter and fluff available. And before, I was probably like 10 years old, 8 years old. I had never heard of it. And I was like, what is this? I'm not having that. We never had it in the house. That and Nutella, never had it in the house.
I never really had Nutella either until like college.
I still have never tried it out like on its own on a sandwich. I've had it in like desserts and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyways, hey, the last week's episode was I don't want to say it was controversial. We still haven't received any shit from the boomers, but it was pretty well received. So much so that we got 2 new 5-star reviews.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, and most of the feedback we got was pretty consistent with what we had said on the episode. We had a lot of people, especially about the neighbor thing. We had a lot of people in the boomer generation say, "Oh, I grew up. I loved my neighbors. We're still in touch, even though we moved out of that neighborhood and that sort of thing." So I learned about myself last week that I'm definitely a boomer more like a boomer when it comes to the neighbor thing. I fall in line with that a lot more. But when it comes to saying I'm a millennial.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I've noticed that listening to past episodes, even on the other podcasts that I do, at this point, I just embrace it. It's probably something I should avoid. But
everybody has something
I feel
like that.
As though if I think about it, I'll get all messed up.
Yeah. Thoughts don't flow. Yeah.
Anyways, we'd like to thank those in the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, Brazil, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, South Africa, and again, parts unknown, for listening to the show. We appreciate the downloads. We appreciate the subscriptions. And if you haven't yet and you stumbled upon this because you want to celebrate the 90s, First of all, welcome. We welcome you to the show. And what do you got to lose? Subscribe. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. 5 stars and a quick review, I should say. They're not, you can do one or the other, but do both. And don't be that guy that just gives 1 star because of stupid reasons. That's all I'll say. So anyways, yeah. And if you want to follow us on the socials, we're on Twitter, Instagram now, thanks to Cindy, the Facebook, and you can email us at
whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
We should say we did receive an email. We know you listen. We apologize for not getting back to you.
Yeah.
It was a very thoughtful email. We will respond to you. We have every intention on doing so. This week, with all that's been going down with the protests and whatnot, it's just been overwhelming. And we say that like not really in the thick of it, but the whole atmosphere right now is pretty captivating, and it's definitely taking, I wouldn't say an emotional toll, but it's definitely taking up a lot of brain real estate.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and just conversations between us, we've been just talking a lot about everything that's going on.
Right.
And,
right. So look, if you want to circle back to last week's episode, if you didn't hear it, the boomers versus the millennials episode, we did touch on the protests, sort of. We touched on the issues that are occurring, and I don't want to necessarily rehash all of it right now, but I will say is that it is sort of cool to see the entire country, the entire world come together on an issue that, I think should have been addressed a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and you figured it was.
Well, in some ways, it seemed like it was to certain people. But yeah, if you missed it, I did post a follow-up to that conversation with a link to it's a Google Doc it's a working document with a bunch of resources and like a step-by-step process to work through some of the information and books and articles and podcasts. There's just so much out there. I think I started to feel overwhelmed with all of it and not know where to start. So if you're interested in checking that out, it is posted on the Facebook page. So that's there for your use if you'd like it.
Again, facebook.com/whileshe'snapping. You can find us on Twitter @she'snappingpod, and you can hit up the Instagram while she's napping on Instagram. So today, I didn't want to not touch on what's going on and act like we're ignoring it, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Not that it doesn't deserve it. We already said our piece last week, so our position and thoughts have not changed, and they probably won't. So we're going to talk about the 90s. We're going to talk about, like I said, what we consider probably the greatest decade ever. The first half, we're going to break down what we loved about the 90s. The second half of the show, we're going to touch on the polls that we put up on Facebook. Again, I should note this. I don't know if this was clear to people. We have a little intermission in the middle of every episode. The episode's not over.
Yeah.
So if you hear like a jazzy hip hop beat just to sort of change the pace up and give you guys a breather, hit pause or something, that's what it's there for. It's there for intermission purposes. You can continue and listen and jive to the beat all you want. You can enjoy it. It's probably about 30 seconds long, but the episode is not over when you hear the music. Only when you hear the intro music again at the end of the episode, that's when it's over. So, while researching this decade, first of all, we'd lived through it, but while researching this, I feel that although there was a lot of controversy, and although this is when the aspect of car crash TV and it was, media was kind of sex driven at the time, this was, I think, the last age of innocence, truly.
Yeah, well, social media, I think, plays a huge role in that. That wasn't available to us. So even though there were certain things available, more readily available with TV and everything, it was like just when the internet was really becoming a thing where you could find anything at any moment. Yeah, that's a huge difference.
I should know when it comes to the internet, touching on the beginning sound. I never had dial-up.
I think I did.
I never had. We went right into broadband.
Yeah, I remember we had to time it when we would be on the phone versus someone needing to use the internet.
Never had that issue. I was the first in my class. Here in Rhode Island, we had Cox Communications. We still do, but Cox Internet was the first cable internet, cable high-speed internet. And I remember telling my classmates, be like, oh, you have like 7 steps to go on AOL? I have 3, and I can use the phone. Like, it just, boom, right there. And I remember my dad was like, this is going to change the internet forever. And it did.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, why didn't we invest? I don't.
Yeah, right.
Should have invested. Lost opportunity. But yeah, I think this is the last age of innocence, because you think of people that, kids in their coming of age, in their, going through their teenage years or pre-teenage years, like 2000, 2005, all the way through now. Things like information, is Santa real? Debunking things, being influenced by bad things. We touched on that last week. Pornography, all of this is available like that. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I was a kid in the mid-90s, you were scouring your dad's closet to find a Playboy. And if you did, you jackpot.
Yeah. That's what I meant in the beginning. I shouldn't have just said social media. I meant the internet in general, and information and images and everything being so readily available.
Yeah.
That's not how it was. Yeah.
And again, not to sound like an old man about this screaming at clouds, but I don't know that the whole going outside thing is as prevalent with kids today. Back in the 90s, again, I sound so old. Back in the 90s, we definitely were out playing all the time. And as I say back in the 90s, am I the only one that feels like it was like 15 years ago, but
No.
it was 30?
You're not the only one.
Jesus.
It doesn't feel like that long ago.
It feels so long.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. If you had to pinpoint one thing that would define that decade, what do you think it would be? Obviously, it's going to shift, but if you could describe it, maybe one word is, or one thing is unfair, but if you could describe it in a certain way, how would you describe the 90s?
Well, I mean, there's all the individual things that we're going to touch on later
in the poll
that kind of break it down by like, food, music, TV, stuff like that. But I think it's hard for me to define the 90s itself without it coming from the perspective, just the fact that it was my childhood.
Right.
So, I mean, looking at it like that, I don't think it's surprising that the word fun comes to mind, but that's because I was a kid. It might not be just because it was the 90s, but I think it was pretty, laid back. It was kind of like, I don't know. I'm just describing my childhood, maybe not the 90s.
I'm surprised that you say it was laid back, because even though I described it as the last age of innocence for kids, as a whole, I feel like that is when things started really rebelling, right? Like I said, television got a little bit more risque. Music was like grunge, hip hop, everything was amped up. The parental advisory stickers and stuff, like parents had to really pay attention they were told that, hey, you need to pay attention to what your kid's listening to, because it's not only like different, but it's very explicit. Rewinding back to the boomers when they were listening to rock and roll, I'm sure there were older people like, you might want to listen to what your kids are listening to. It's badly, influential and stuff, but it wasn't explicit. Whereas the music... Well,
for that time, I think there were certain things that were.
They're not dropping F-bombs.
No, it was a different standard, though, of what was explicit. But I guess so this goes back to, I think it was the Mother's Day episode about how I was a goody two-shoes and you were kind of rebellious.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why we have that different perspective, because I wasn't really listening to that kind of music and stuff. I don't know if that was intentional on my parents' part, that we didn't really have that kind of stuff in the house. We talked about how I didn't have a TV in my room. Like, I think in that sense, I was a little bit more sheltered, if that's the right word. But when I say fun and laid back, I'm thinking about what you just said about the being outside. And we talked about this on the climate change episode too. I spent a ton of time outside when I was younger. I mean, I did dance classes, but that was mostly on the weekends when I was younger. Once I got older, it was almost every day. But when I was younger, it was, you come home from school and you go outside and play, or you get your homework done and then you go outside and play until the streetlights came on, and then you go home and you eat dinner, and that was it.
Yeah. You watch your favorite TV show and whatnot. That's the thing. Like, again, I don't watch current TV in terms of what the quote-unquote the young people are watching. But I do feel like the entertainment aspect was top-notch. in the 90s, and each decade obviously has what defines them. I'm starting at the 60s because it's just easy. You had like this, in terms of music, you had the hippie generation in the 60s, and the 70s you had disco, and the 80s you had that like synth kind of pop.
Yeah,
and
like 80s ballads.
Yeah, and then the 90s there was sort of this explosion of different genres. Not that they didn't exist before. It's just, I think each individual genre became more and more popular than they ever had before. So you had grunge rock, pop rock, hip hop, like even rap, like underground rap became really, really popular.
Yeah, right. It was all pop in its own respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everything was amplified. That's what I think is awesome about the 90s, is that there was a good mix of everything. And I don't want to describe it as eccentric because I think that would be more 80s, but you had the 90s, you think back, it's just like these weird plastic colors everywhere, like these weird like Easter egg kind of
That is
colors.
true. I think of the 90s and I just think of color.
Yeah.
The 80s too, to some extent.
These pastel colors.
Yeah, and bright colors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fashion and, album covers and TV show logos and brands and toys. Yeah, I can see that.
Everything. Everything that came down to always food, man. Always.
No, but even the food was brightly colored. I mean.
Yeah. Even politically, it seemed like it was a good time. I know, I'm thinking strictly just like Bill Clinton era, that 8 years. I know, depending on what side of the aisle you were on, but politically and sociologically, it was probably one of the best times to live in terms of making money, because things were pretty good when it came to the economy.
For our demographic, from where we grew up, from our perspective. And as a kid, not really knowing anything about politics, it's like, things seem to be going well. But that was also just, again, a sheltered kind of, not a complete picture, but still,
So let's talk about some of the things in the pop and entertainment aspect of the 90s. So for me, outside of the colors, outside of being the last age of innocence I talked on, things got a little bit more risque. If you could think of one thing, I'll go first. The one thing in an entertainment aspect that describes the 90s, or that to you was like, that's so 90s. For me, this might be controversial or maybe sort of like typical, but wrestling to me is so 90s.
Yeah, it is.
Especially because you can break it up in two different eras, just like the last age of innocence and the risque part. Because the last age of innocence, you had these like cartoon superhero like wrestlers.
Is that like Hulk Hogan?
Hulk Hogan. Yeah. Well, he was more 80s, but still he had a presence in the 90s. Hulk Hogan, Doink the Clown, Macho Man Randy Savage, The Undertaker, Yokozuna, these weird characters that were sort of cartoonish.
Almost like comic book.
Yeah, they were definitely appealing to a younger audience, whereas you flip the switch into like 1997, 98, you had like nudity, you had people flipping the bird, you had people swearing on TV, like evening gown matches where the woman was stripped down to her bra and panties and stuff. It was so weird. And that, for me, watching that as a kid and seeing that flip quickly, it really messed with my development and coming of age, whereas I had to mature really quickly.
Yeah. Probably
quicker than I should have, if you think about it. And I know that sounds like such a old person thing to say, be like, oh, now I understand the aspect of why that's not good for a kid. But at the same time, I do find value in it because it did kind of accelerate my rebellious side and be like, no, I'm not. Fuck all these people. Fuck this. Like Stone Cold, everything. It was just, for me, in that aspect, I don't know that you could ever see something like that in any other decade, really. And it's not just relative to wrestling. You could think of Jerry Springer, you could think of Maury, like all these talk shows, Howard Stern, like that stuff would never be born today and be allowed, or if it was allowed, it just wouldn't popularize, I think.
You mean, I think they would be called out real quick. Yeah. On being not politically correct and things like that.
Think of like Beavis and Butthead. Beavis and Butthead would never survive if it was brand new today.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything that's come out recently, like in the 2000s, that's been like that. That's been controversial, but also kind of praised.
Yeah.
Like Beavis and Butthead was like really popular. Everybody made jokes about it. Like it was, not really criticized. I mean, I'm sure it was by some parents and
definitely.
people in the older generation, right,
Yeah.
who didn't approve of their kids watching it or whatever. But by and large, I think as a culture, it was accepted.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it was popular.
Yeah, that's what
Like
I mean.
think of early Simpsons.
Yeah,
with
I was just
Bart
thinking the same
Simpson.
thing.
Like
Yep.
it's
I mean, now we kind of have like Family Guys kind of, it definitely
it
addresses.
pushes the envelope.
It does, yeah.
But I'm sure there's some sort of censorship around that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, Ren and Stimpy. Like we'll
Yeah.
talk about.
Oh my God.
We'll talk about old school Nicktoons in a bit, but Ren and Stimpy, Rocko's Modern Life. You watch the original versions of those things instead of the re-releases. The original ones, I watched some original Rocko's Modern Life, and I'm like, what the hell is this?
I know.
But recently, I watched it, and I was, what? How was I watching this and not? It's twofold. First of all, how was this allowed on the air? Secondly, how was I watching this and not aware of what was going on?
Because you were a kid and you
I was
had
just
an innocent
watching
mind.
a cartoon.
Yeah.
You
You were viewing it from a place of innocence.
Yeah. But I never extrapolated the, ooh, this is kind of fucked upness
Yeah.
of it.
Well, there are some innuendos and like slight things, even in like in Frozen, there's a part where she says foot size doesn't matter.
Oh.
And it's like, that's a joke for the adults.
Yeah.
Like the kids are never going to understand that. But I think that's the only quote that I can think of. But there are still things like that, but it's way more subtle. I mean, some of those 90 cartoons were like really out there.
Sticking on the topic of TV and Nicktoons, Nickelodeon back in the day. Oh my God.
Yeah.
People don't know. Like I know they re-release Nicktoons and stuff, and sometimes they'll rebroadcast some old episodes and stuff. But if you weren't a kid during that time, you don't know. You could put on Nickelodeon after school and just watch because there wasn't a bad show. There are shows like Hey Dude and stuff that you could do without. But even then, you're
Hey
like,
Dude.
okay. But even then, you're like, even
Yeah,
if
it
you
was
don't
still-
like it, you'll just leave it on because you're thinking, just gotta wait for the next show.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, that's a totally different dynamic too, specific to TV about how things are now. And you don't even need cable. A lot of households don't have cable. There's no such thing as waiting for the next show to come on.
now it's on demand.
Yeah, it's all streaming.
Yeah.
Or it's, if you do have cable, you record the show you want to watch and you fast forward through the commercials. It's like,
Yeah.
you don't have to sit there and wait for your next favorite show to come on.
I remember ordering movies on pay-per-view. I remember ordering wrestling events on pay-per-view, throwing in the blank tape and the VCR and taping them.
I used to do that for TRL.
TRL.
When my favorite band what I knew that they were coming on that day or their music video was going to air, and so I would put the tape in and record it.
Imagine that. Like how many kids today give a shit about music videos?
Right, I know. I know. Yep.
I imagine that there's still a decent amount of production in them, but I remember watching TRL and being like, I need to know the countdown. What's the countdown to number one?
Mm-hmm.
Always,
Yep.
always.
Yep.
I don't even know if it's still on. Maybe it is.
I have no idea. Yeah, I know. And you were talking about ordering pay-per-view movies and stuff. We didn't really do that, but I remember when my dad was like on the ball with Netflix, the original like Netflix format was
discs.
ordering the discs.
He burned the discs.
And renting. Yeah.
Yes.
Like he thought he was really cool.
Burning the discs. But that's a 2000
Which it kind of was
thing.
cool.
We're
I mean,
fast forwarding.
It was it.
That's
When was
2000,
Netflix?
yeah.
That was 2000.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, that was. I'm just thinking of how different Netflix is now
yeah.
to when it was back then.
Oh yeah. I remember the eBay bubble, everything in the late 1990s, and everyone was like, "This is gonna change the world," and it kind of did. But I don't know. For me, the biggest thing that sticks out when people talk about the 90s is the pop culture, is the music and the television and whatnot, and the culture that spawned off that. And again, I do think it's this like rebellious side of people that wasn't present. I know in the 80s you had your punk rock and that was pretty rebellious, but this was more on a grand scale. Like in the 80s, that rebellious side wasn't necessarily mainstream. In the 90s, it became mainstream. It became quote unquote acceptable to be put on media because it sold.
And it defines the decade.
Car crash TV is a huge part of the 90s. And that's not to say cars crashing, but the whole aspect of what's going to happen? Anything can happen. Shock and awe kind of thing.
Like you can't look away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the 90s, it was super prevalent. So, you have these little aspects of it in the Nicktoons, and then you bring it to 100 with the movies and the culture. And it was just, for me, it's a great time to be alive. I'm so thankful to be part of that. And I can only imagine the headaches that my parents had to go through. Because again, like the culture shock was so huge.
Yeah.
Imagine being a parent back then. Like having your coming of age in the late 70s and the 80s, and then having kids in the mid to, I don't know, I said that wrong. Like getting married in the early 80s, having kids in the mid 80s or whatnot, or late 80s, and having them grow up in the 90s and thinking, oh my God, what are my kids watching? Like, you weren't, I don't know if necessarily that parents were conscious of that until they saw the content, because I'm sure when they were watching TV as kids, if they were at all, their parents had a certain level of trust that what their kids were watching wasn't that explicit, you know, so that was sort of passed down to them as parents, and then they come in and watch their kids looking at Beavis and Butthead. Oh, this looks like a fun cartoon, and hearing the dialogue, and they're like, what are you watching? Yeah,
but I can imagine that in earlier decades, like when our parents were growing up, there were probably parents that thought whatever they were watching was trash.
Yeah.
Even if now, in hindsight for us, it seems something like so innocent, like a Western or something.
Yeah.
There were probably people from that generation who thought that was too violent. You know, even though now it looks like absolutely nothing, like it's no big deal. But I'm sure it's like every iteration and every generation as things progress more and more, at the time when it's new, seems more, you know, offensive than it does in hindsight.
Yeah. You know, not just the cartoons and whatnot, but sitcoms. Remember when sitcoms were a thing?
Yeah.
They're not really a thing anymore. And the people try to make them a thing, but you had shows like Friends. I know you love Friends. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Full House, like all these sitcoms.
Everybody loves
Family
Raymond.
Matters. Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, that's our favorite.
But that's not something that kids would have watched. ER.
No, but it was popular in the 90s.
Yeah. ER even. Like, I know that's not a sitcom,
those
but still.
dramas.
Yeah, the Law and Order, early Law and Order, watching SVU back in the day with Stabler. I'm just like, oh, this is so old, but it's so funny. But I feel that those kind of shows were deeply influential for how people developed. Really, like, imagine having a show like Friends today. It just wouldn't work. And I think Jennifer Aniston even said that. Because people always call for redo another season. And I think Jennifer Aniston was like, we can't. Like, you just can't have a group of friends in a coffee shop anymore without these distractions, because they don't exist.
Right. It'd be a completely different dynamic. Totally
Imagine
different show.
Friends with smartphones.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work.
Right. Yeah. It's true.
You know? But that to me is something that deeply defines the 90s, the pop culture aspect, the music, all of these things sort of intertwine with each other to define the decade. And I don't necessarily think that's prevalent in other decades. Maybe it is because I didn't live through them, and if I did my research, perhaps, but I feel like this is more pop culture driven and less politically driven than any other decade.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, like in the early 2000s, you had the Bush and the 9/11 and whatnot,
right?
And that
Well,
accelerated
and that's
things.
the thing. I think we failed to mention that on the generation episode we did, but that's really the defining moment that you know, the differentiates millennials from Gen Z was 9/11. Yeah. So that's kind of like it makes sense that we think of before 9/11 and after.
Right.
They're two totally separate worlds.
Right. And maybe it's because that's when I started to be more, I don't want to say aware, but paying attention a little bit more to politics and really discovering what a Democrat and a Republican were. Like, I didn't necessarily understand the divide when I was a kid, because I was a kid. I wasn't paying attention to that. Right. And that wasn't something that was brought up in the household a lot. To this day, I don't know how political my parents are and how my mom to this day is. I imagine she's left-leaning from what she says, but politics and discussions of that never really took place in the household.
Well, for us, that was a rule. And I think a lot of people growing up, like, you didn't talk politics and you didn't talk religion at the dinner table or at the holidays. Like, it was off limits.
Right.
That was just an understood thing.
Before we hit our break and, you know, talk about the polls that we put up, is there anything else that you want to say that stuck out to you or made the 90s special for you?
Well, I was thinking we were talking about movies, and I got ahead of myself talking about Netflix. The 90s were the
Major Video.
Yeah, and Blockbuster. Renting the videos.
And Hollywood Video.
Yeah, that was one thing we didn't fit into the polls, but that I think that just speaks to your point about pop culture and like everything, like going to rent a movie and watch it, like that was a thing.
That was an event.
Yeah, it was a big to do. It wasn't just streaming something
your
on
membership
Netflix.
card.
Yeah. Be kind, rewind.
That's it. You can rent as many movies as you want with that membership. I don't even remember how much it was.
I don't either. No idea.
But I remember when I was, I think, 15, so that had to be around 2000. Actually, it wasn't 2000. I had a Blockbuster card. I'm like, it's so fucking cool. When you guys want a Blockbuster, I got it.
Yeah.
Like it was just these little things that's part of the age of innocence, right? Because, again, I'm not saying you had to work for it, but these things weren't available at your fingertips. So even things like trip to the mall in the 90s, my God, that was the thing to do.
Yeah.
Even if you weren't buying anything, you just go at the mall. And if you watch the movie Mallrats, that is a perfect representation of the 90s.
Yep.
Stupid fucking bowl cuts. I had a bowl cut.
Yeah, my brother did too.
Bowl cuts, spiked hair. Shout out to my best friend who had a spiked hair.
With tips? Did he have tips?
No, he didn't have frosted tips. The guy I work with, my good friend that I work with, he had
I bet
frosted
he
tips.
did.
But my best friend had spiked hair and the rat tail.
It's awesome. Yeah, my brother had a rat tail too for a while.
Totally 90s.
Yep.
But yeah, going to Major Video, going to Blockbuster was an event. Again, calling back to wrestling, renting these old wrestling pay-per-views or getting the movie when it came out. You had to race to Blockbuster, and they had, at least from what I remember, they had the title, like the cover of the VHS in front, and maybe like 3 or 4 rentable tapes behind it. And you were just so deflated when you went there and you just saw the cover flat against the wall, meaning there was no copies available, nothing. And, that going to the mall, listening to CDs before you bought them in the shareable headphones and stuff.
Yep. Or recording your favorite song on your cassette radio.
Yes.
When it came on and waiting for it to come on so you could record it.
Or if you couldn't do that, you had a boombox and a boombox facing each other, and you had the record on one side and the radio on the other, and you had to make sure the speakers were lined up together. Mm-hmm. Just these little things. Remember GIMP?
Yes.
Of
course, I went to camp.
Yeah.
That's all we did was make GIMP bracelets.
GIMP was awesome.
Yep.
You had
the different patterns.
Yeah. They still do them at, calling back to Rhode Island, the Situate Art Festival, but the sand art and the Coca-Cola bottles with the frill tops and stuff.
Oh, yeah. I had birthday parties where that was the activity. Yeah. We made sand art.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Remember the Pizza Hut reading club? Did you have that at school? We did. If you read a book and did a voluntary book report, Pizza Hut would give you a free personal pan pizza.
I don't remember that. We probably had it, but I don't remember.
Jesus.
Yeah. We sound so old.
But those little things, I know we shit on fast food and stuff, but for me, McDonald's was such a thing. And this was a poll.
And you collect the toys.
Yeah, the Happy Meals. This was a poll that we didn't end up putting up because we didn't think it would be that, much of a divide. But Burger King Kids Club and Happy Meals, I remember being in the mood for specific ones based on the toys.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You went for the toys.
90s were a good time. All right, hang tight. We're going to get to the polls right after this. We're going to take a quick break. Before we get to the polls, I was thinking, some of the things that we were doing when we were kids in the 90s that I think no longer is prevalent because of technology. And again, I sound so old. Remember note passing?
Yeah. Yep. With check boxes for your response.
Do you like me? Check yes. Check no.
Mm-hmm.
What do they text now in class?
I guess.
I remember that. Just with the gel pens.
The sparkly gel pens. Yep.
All right, so you were kind enough and what's the including? You were including enough? No, that doesn't make sense.
What?
You were including everybody in this episode, our faithful listeners, when it comes to their input on the 90s.
Yeah.
So we put up some polls. A lot of them surround the pop culture, and unlike the Rhode Island episode, hardly any are around food, only one, right?
Which is funny because when we first started talking about it, we were texting and it was like you said we came up with the Dunkaroos, Lunchables or something like that, like a lunchbox snack. And then it just spiraled from there into just
food.
like food. And you finally called me out and you're like, Sydney, can we can't do another entire episode about food.
We can't.
So that was intentional. We know there are a lot of other food memorable food items from the 90s that, we all would like to vote on our favorites for, but we had to rein it in with the food.
It. I understand.
So we tried to cover a lot of other categories. We did some TV, some music, some, the one food question, stuff like that.
And before we get to them, I do want to say we cannot encapsulate the 90s with how many polls do we have? 8 here. It's not going to do it justice.
No, not at all. And I also want to say that I learned, we've talked about how we're not all that savvy with social media. I'm kind of learning as I go here, but it turns out that you can't put more than 2 options on a Facebook poll unless you're within a group, Facebook group.
Okay.
So because our page is just a page, it's not a group, I can only include 2 options on these polls. So that's why they might seem like, oh, you left this out. I have to just choose 2. So if there's ever a poll and you have another favorite that's not in the official poll, please just put it in the comments because it's probably one that crossed our mind too. I have to just pick 2.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we're not excluding anything purposely, but we did have to be diplomatic when it came to the number of polls because, like Cindy had already said, we had talked about this, and I think we came up with 15 or so.
Oh, we had a really long list, and then we just had to narrow it down.
We had to cut it. So go ahead.
So we'll start with that food one. So all the fun, processed, colorful junk food that was our childhood in the 90s. We picked 2 that we thought were kind of representative. Our poll was Dunkaroos or Lunchables. What was your favorite thing to find in your lunchbox when you were going to school?
It had to be Dunkaroos.
I know. Well, it's like that. That's like the dessert one. You know,
and I truth be told, I may have had Lunchables once or twice.
Yeah, I didn't have them that much either, but so Dunkaroos did win 87%. So it was kind of a landslide for Dunkaroos, and I think they're actually bringing them back now.
Yes, they are.
So that's kind of cool. But the Lunchables definitely had a very distinct texture. That's
Cardboard,
what I remember. Yeah,
like dry.
But why was it so good?
Because it was all right. So the shitty ones were like ham and cheese. You didn't want that, but you wanted the pizza. Yeah.
Yes.
And it wasn't even good.
And the pepperoni was basically the same meat as the ham from the ham and cheese.
But it was cold. Like you're thinking when you have it as a kid, oh, I'll just melt this. No, it's just
cold cheese and cold.
I know
pizza crust. I know. And I hate cold pizza.
But you were just, I love it. And
I know.
It wasn't good.
I know.
It wasn't good. But I do remember when I was a kid having Dunkaroos, I would purposely, and this is how gross I was in the 90s, and I don't think I don't think a lot of 90s kids would be different. Maybe I was just weird. Maybe I am. But I remember eating all the cookies first and then like fingering the frosting and just shoving that shit in my mouth. I was like, so good. Especially when it was the birthday cake one.
Yeah. So that's where our daughter must get it from because she does that with any kind, like with hummus or yogurt or
and
anything. Ketchup, any kind of condiment. She just scoops it with her hand.
I remember feeling like the roundness of that.
Oh my God.
Pouch.
The plastic.
Yes. But
so gross.
It was only the birthday cake one. The chocolate one I would dip because you had these shitty, like, I don't know. The chocolate one was always boring, and I used to make little sandwiches with them. But the birthday cake, I was like, oh, I'm saving you. And I would just eat it. So good.
That's awesome. All right. So some of the other food that we had wanted to do but didn't get included in the polls were things like Gushers and Fruit by the Foot. And
Let's do that right now. What would you choose?
Probably Gushers because I didn't get them very often. That was like I longed for Gushers. I don't know why we never really bought them. I had Fruit by the Foot and fruit roll-ups more often. And I liked in the fruit roll-ups you could pop out the shapes. Do you remember those?
Yes.
Different character
remember
ones and
when
stuff like that?
the plastic, the peel on it had tattoos on it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. But
you were eating ink.
and
Like,
fruit by the
literally.
foot was just fun to eat.
Yeah, so
it was like
I would,
a tape, like a
yes.
roll of tape.
First of all, again, things that would never come back. No way would the health organization or whatever, the FDA, allow 3 feet of
sugar.
gummy sugar.
Just sugar.
Just here you go. Here's your lunch.
Yeah.
Like,
But
you
yeah,
get-
I
you
think
get your
Gushers are my
shitty
favorite.
Tuna sandwich, your juice box, and here's a fruit by the foot.
Yeah. So what was yours?
Gross. Fruit by the foot, I would
Yeah.
have to say, because I remember my brother used to do this. I remember distinctively 3 feet of, sugar paste, and he would unwind the whole thing. And I remember at the end, it was folded.
Yep.
It had a folded loop, and he would just put the top in his mouth and just eat it like no hands, just continue eating it. And like he had a long ass tongue. And that's
so
how
funny.
you ate fruit by the foot,
Yep.
because that's how they did it in the commercial.
Right.
And so that's
Yep.
what you would do. No one ate it like segments.
Right,
No,
like rip
you're
off a piece or anything. You just eat it in one
fucking
piece.
36 inches of just sugar paste
Yep.
into your mouth. I was never a really big fan of Gushers. Like I remember them exploding when I chewed them and stuff, but give me fruit by the foot.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So next was one that you said was absolutely required. It's one that I don't have super strong feelings about, but you wanted to put up the poll about the gaming systems. What was
Yes.
the gaming console of the 90s? And so this was Sega or Nintendo.
Super Nintendo.
Super Nintendo. Sorry. So the results were even split. 50-50.
50-50.
Yep. And I know I grew up with the Sega Genesis. And I have great memories of playing video games with my brother on the Sega Genesis, and it was specifically Sonic.
Yes.
Yeah, you know where this is going. But because technically the game system and the games, all that was my brother's. Like he got the gifts
He's
and everything.
first player.
Even though I really liked playing too. He was the boy, so he got the video games, and so it was his Sega. He got to be player 1. He got the primary controller, so he was always Sonic, and I was always stupid Tails, and he would just run away from me and leave me behind, and then I'd have to wait for Tails to fly in again just to play for 3 seconds before he did it again, because Sonic could go so fast and Tails could only be on the screen if Sonic was there with him. So I got screwed so many times playing that game. And then I started dating you, and we were like, hey, let's play these old school Sega games. I have Sonic the Hedgehog. Want to play? Sure. But I'm player 1.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
I'm player 1. First of all,
So now
that is-
every time we play that game, I'm still Tails. I can never be Sonic.
So I don't
Not
know,
meant to be.
I don't know if the player 1, player 2 divide is still there today with the newer systems. I don't play them. I don't have PS4 or whatever the new Xbox is. I don't have that, but that was a big thing in the 90s. It's my house, friend.
So I'm player 1.
I'm player 1. I'm Sonic or
Yeah.
I'm Mario.
Yeah.
You could be fucking Luigi and Tails. Good luck. But it's my house.
So was that the same with Nintendo?
Yeah.
Because I only ever played Sega.
It's my house. I'm player 1.
Same
or it's
dynamic.
Yeah.
Just different games.
My brother was always player 2.
So what were some of the Nintendo games, like the iconic ones of the 90s?
Mario, Duck Hunt, Zelda.
Okay. Yeah, I never really
the
played
gold
any of those.
cartridge. You never had Zelda? The
Nope.
gold one? No. Top
Nope.
Gun.
I did Mortal Kombat on Sega.
Yeah, that's Sega.
Yep. Yeah, we did all Sega games. We never had a Nintendo. We got a PlayStation later.
Contra and Nintendo.
Nope, never played any
No.
of those. Street Fighter? Was that what it was called?
Street Fighter was
Sega.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a direct rival with
Yep.
Mortal Kombat. The reason why Mortal Kombat I feel is better because it introduced blood. Again, there you
Oh,
go.
really?
Age of
Yeah,
Innocence
there
gone.
you go. Yep.
Fatalities and stuff. I remember
Mhm.
when that was a big thing. My vote is Sega. I know Super Nintendo is the better system, and it may arguably have better games. Turtles in Time, that was on Super Nintendo. Donkey Kong was on Super Nintendo. I know as a system it was probably better. I just grew up with Sega. So
Yeah, me too.
I went from Sega right to PlayStation 1. I never had an N64, which I think is the king of all systems. Personally, I think it's the king because you had the original GoldenEye on there. That's all you need. But Sega to me was everything. I remember getting Game Genie, which was the cheat code cartridge, right? So when you had to look up codes for
Yeah.
games, you had to search for them in like game magazines and stuff. Whereas if you got Game Genie, that went into the Sega, and you put the games on top of the Game Genie, and it got all the codes for you.
Oh wow.
It
Yeah, we
all
never
the
had
codes
that. Or
implemented.
maybe my brother did, and that's why he always beat me.
Yeah. But just the games on there, like Sonic, we're already talking about. Aladdin. Remember Aladdin for Sega? So good. Lion King for Sega. These Disney games. So good. But Mortal Kombat. I remember Mortal Kombat 3. That shit was awesome. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was so good.
Yeah.
So good. And it was so, again, risque. You had chicks playing with like thongs.
Yeah.
And I was 12.
Yeah.
Ripping people's fucking face off. It was great.
Yep.
Can't beat it. I loved it. NBA Live 95, all the Madden was more computer before it went to like popularity with the game system. But Sega to me is the winner, and I'm not surprised it was a 50-50 split though.
Yeah. No, Sega got my vote too. All right, now we moved into TV, which 90s TV we already talked about in the first half is just its own beast. And so the first one I wanted to start with was on the weekend. Which lineup of TV shows were you most looking forward to? So on Friday night you had TGIF, and on Saturday nights you had SNCC.
This is tough.
I know this one was really hard, I think, for a lot of people. And for me, it's funny, when I was searching for images to put in the poll, I was being reminded of all the shows. Like I was only thinking of a couple here and there, you know, that I remember being part of each of the lineups, but it was reminding me of all the different ones. And I was like, oh, that's right. I used to love watching that show. And it just made it that much harder for me to choose between the two.
Do you remember some lineups?
What do you mean?
Order?
Like in order? No, I don't remember the order.
I remember one of them when All That hit the scene. First, before All That, it was Roundhouse.
That's right. Yep.
Whenever my life gets me so down. So good. That was the initial like Mad TV
Okay.
for Nickelodeon, and then they
Yep.
brought in All That. So All That, I think Pete and Pete was on that lineup, Ren and Stimpy, and it always ended with Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yes. And that's the one I remember the most.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then TGIF, it was some combination of Family Matters, Boy Meets World,
Yep. Full House.
and Sister?
Or Clarissa Explains It All.
No, Clarissa's
might have been
Nickelodeon.
Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah, TGIF,
You're right. I'm
ABC.
sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Saturday. Yep. So yeah, this one was hard. I definitely enjoyed all of them.
Yeah.
I would watch it Friday and Saturday. But if I had to pick, my vote was for TGIF specifically. Boy Meets World for me is like, takes the
Yeah.
cake. Boy Meets World and Full House were my two favorite shows in the 90s. 100%.
Okay, you're looking at me like.
I thought you wanted to add something.
No,
okay.
continue.
Oh, well, I'll give the result of the poll, and then I want to hear your final conclusion. So TGIF did win by a slight margin, 61% for TGIF.
That's not slight.
It's pretty. It's compared to some of the other
Sure,
ones. It's not a landslide.
So here's how I evaluated it. Which was better? I think for me, at that time when TGIF got, I don't want to say big, but that solid lineup of shows that included Boy Meets World, I was in that demographic that Corey Matthews was in.
Right.
So I was kind of growing up with him on the show in terms of the issues they were dealing with, like asking out girls and stuff. Like it was so
relatable.
Yes. So in that aspect, I lean TGIF. However, SNCC, I think, had the more timeless lineup. I'd rather watch SNCC stuff today than TGIF stuff today.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But at the time, I think I would lean TGIF.
Yeah, I think SNCC was just overall maybe more just entertaining in general, whereas TGIF had some of those relatable.
Right.
I can see that.
Look, I can't even watch Fuller House right now.
Oh, I love it.
But Full House, if I watched it today, it would be nostalgic.
Right.
But I would just laugh. What was I watching? Like, this is kind of dumb. This is not good in terms of quality television. Like Danny Tanner catches, this never happened. Danny Tanner catches DJ smoking weed and they have a discussion about it. And then Danny Tanner would say something like, all right, I'm going to go weed the grass. Dad, and then it'd be like,
and then they hug.
"Aw."
Yeah. And so what's great about Fuller House, though, is that they recognize all of that and make fun of it and
Okay,
double down
so
on it. So it's that
The fourth wall was broken.
yeah, they completely acknowledge it's like, oh, we have to end the conversation with a hug or it wouldn't be the Fuller House. You
Right.
know what I mean? So anyway, you got to watch it with that perspective.
I think, going on a tangent for a second, I think that is something that sort of highlights and solidifies the 90s as a great era. But at the same time, this pisses me off today. Stop replicating shit. Stop bringing it back. Fuller House is probably the only exception of something that was successful that was brought back. Don't bring it back. Like, there's a reason why Beavis and Butthead was so awesome back in the 90s and not today. Because people loved music videos and stuff, and people liked to talk about it.
Right,
and
it was relevant.
people were watching
to the
TV. You
time.
can't do that today. Right? And you see, like, they're talking about bringing back Fresh Prince. Why? Don't do that. Like, it's just, leave it alone. Leave it, because what makes the 90s so great, and you think, like, remember Girl Meets World? They brought the sequel to Boy Meets World. Oh, this is going to be great. No one cared.
Right.
No one cared. And it's because you have to put yourself back in those circumstances that aren't happening today. And you think that you're going to love this show that's being brought back because of the nostalgia. But that's what makes the show so special, is that it's nostalgic. When you bring it back and force it into today's circumstances, it's not as compelling.
Well, I think that's why Fuller House is successful, because they are still targeting the same audience. It's for people like me who watched it growing up, and now I'm watching the girls, the kids
Right.
that were the kids at the time in the original show as adults. Now they're my age and they're in my stage of life
Right.
and they have kids themselves. So it's still focused on those characters, but at a different time in life. It's not like they're trying to focus on their kids and redo it, So
I'd
that's where I
rather
think they
just-
were smart.
When I was a kid, my dad sat me down and not made me, but we would watch The Twilight Zone together. First of all, bad idea. Like, I can very much appreciate that show and its brilliance, but the Something
Freaked you
on the
out.
Wing
I know,
episode
that
gave me
one.
nightmares
Yeah.
for months. But if there was an Are You Afraid of the Dark redone for today, I would still make our daughter watch the old ones instead. If she was going to watch one of them, I just watch the old ones. They're better.
Yeah.
It's more fitting, I think, for you. And I don't know. Maybe that's just my bias bleeding through. But anyways, long story short, I'm going Snick.
Okay.
right.
Solid choice.
Yeah.
All right. Another TV one. This one was really hard for me too. Doug or Rugrats.
Again, back to Nickelodeon.
Yep. And they were both on Saturday mornings, I believe.
Yeah, but they were
Saturday
also
morning cartoons.
on
Other times.
during the week.
Yeah. That's why I had trouble. I wanted to post that poll for Saturday morning, like reminiscing about
Maybe
Saturday
they
morning
were on
cartoons,
Snick.
but I
Were they?
don't remember. I think that they were on Saturday mornings, but regardless, they were on a lot. That's why I can't remember, because they were on all the time.
And it was the same episodes, but you just couldn't get enough of them.
Right. And they were pretty similar. So I chose Rugrats. Rugrats is my go-to. I know.
Doug.
I know. I love them both, but I just have more memories of watching Rugrats over and over
Patty
again.
mayonnaise.
Yeah.
Give me some, Patty.
Yeah, I remember very specific episodes of Doug too. Like I remember the one where he tried sushi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or liver and
And
onions.
liver and onions. Yep. Those are the two that I remember the most too.
The sounds in Doug, like
Yeah.
just like the mouth sounds of everything was just it encapsulated me. This is what I'm saying. Like, it was so relatable, because I feel that when you were growing up in that time, at that age of Doug and in middle school and stuff, that is how you felt. Like, that is what you thought. These world-ending scenarios, like, he found my journal. It was like the end of the world. Some
Right.
dude, my bully, found my journal. You would freak out as a kid if that
Yep.
happened. Freak out. And your favorite band, like the beats and stuff, everything. You had your rich friend. Who was the rich chick?
Roger. Oh, the chick.
Yeah. She was the rich one. Fuck. If
don't remember.
people know. Oh, God.
I remember
what's her
Roger
name?
was like the bad guy.
Roger was Baconhead.
Yes,
he had 3
was
slices of
green and he
bacon
had
for-
and he wore the leather jacket, and,
And he
then
had the
Skeeter
cat.
was the blue, his friend that was blue.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And there was the athlete. Yeah. See, I remember his neighbor was Mr. Dink.
I didn't remember that.
Very expensive.
So Doug did win that one.
Of course he did.
again, not landslide, but 59% for Doug, 41 for Rugrats. So that one was kind of close too. I know
God.
people had trouble choosing.
That's going to bother me now. If anybody knows the name of the rich girl from Doug, let
us know. All right, next was game show. This one was hard too. And this is one of the ones I had a hard time just choosing two. So we went with Double Dare and Legends of the Hidden Temple.
Again, Nickelodeon shows.
Mm-hmm. And Nickelodeon kind of defined.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. What was it, Nickelodeon?
The slime, the
Yeah.
gack.
Gag. Yeah.
I gotta go Legends. Shrine of the Silver Monkey.
Yep. I think Legends is like, in a way, is more iconic of the 90s.
The blue barracudas.
Yeah. It was so dramatic.
The orange
For the
orangutans.
same obstacles every time that like you should
You
have.
had the fright. What were the bad guys' names?
What do you mean the bad
The ones
guys?
that like grabbed you.
Oh God, I don't remember. I know they like came out from behind the set and
That's so traumatic as a child.
Right. I know.
They were never allowed you to be touched today. You literally got taken away
Yeah.
off stage
Yeah.
to a black room
Yeah.
by a guy dressed as an indigenous species with a mask
Right.
and just like the
Yeah.
guy from Crash Bandicoot.
Right.
Hooblaga.
Yeah.
Snatched you up while this guy is narrating. Oh no, he got taken. Go, go, go.
Yeah. So Legends of the Hidden Temple did win the poll
Of course it did.
by a lot. It was 77% to 23% Double Dare.
How do you not put together the Shrine of the Silver
That's
Monkey?
what I
card?
said.
It's 3 pieces.
And it's the same. It's you. If you've watched it once, you should know how to do
And the head has this long
stick.
spinal
I know.
cord
You
neck.
just. Yep. I know.
And you
They
saw me-
never ever got it right on the first try. That's what I posted. So I was like, it just gave me anxiety. Like, and they never got it.
Have you ever watched the show before?
Right.
But I honestly, I do think that I saw a documentary about it. So, YouTube's great when they do, like, people do independent documentaries on old school shows. I think they taped them all within 2 days.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That would explain it.
Because I remember at the
Some of it.
park, at the Universal Studios where Nickelodeon's park was,
Mm-hmm.
the theme park, they would just invite the people in. You didn't have to pay to go to watch those shows, to
I
be
did
in the
that.
audience. Yeah.
I did that. My
Yeah.
parents got chosen to be part of one of the things. They
What?
never aired. It was, so maybe it wasn't the real show, but it was like a thing at Universal.
Okay.
And they got chosen from the audience, and it was like a Double Dare type
Yeah.
game. Yep.
Double Dare
We
was
had to
fun.
throw hula hoops on them. We didn't get slime. I was bummed about that. But
Legends won this, right? You said.
yeah, Legends won.
Double Dare was fun. It was just slime, so you
Yeah.
got slimed a bunch. But I think what would you do
Mm-hmm.
with the
Mark Summers, right?
Mark
Was he-
Summers was
yeah.
both. What would you do? It was always whipped cream pie.
Yeah.
It was just
Pie in the
pie
face.
crust, whipped cream.
Yeah.
And you were on the pie pod if you got something wrong, and there's 6 pies to your face. And the other ones from the sides, from your left and right, would always miss. But the one in front is just right here. It
Yep.
got you right in the face.
Every time.
Yeah, those shows, I know this wasn't a poll, but remember Guts?
Yes.
Like, that shit was... All right,
that was
first
like
of all,
Ninja Warrior, like the original.
but
for kids.
these kids were hardcore.
I know.
Like, I remember watching them as a kid, be like, these kids are badass.
Yeah.
Like, what was the guy's
Global
name?
Guts.
Mike something. The
yeah,
guy.
I can't remember his last
But I
name.
remember he's like, let's go to the leaderboard, Mo! And Mo's like, all right, Mike, we got... Like,
Yeah.
this shit. That was a terrible accent, but he's like, you had this hardcore thing, like, all right, we got everybody in the leaderboard, let's go to everybody, let's go to the leaderboard, Mo! And the chick's name was Mo.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
this is the same guy, the same name of the bartender at Simpsons,
Yeah.
but the commentator for this Olympic sport kids thing, her name was Mo.
Mo. Yep. It's funny. It's so you remember so many details. It's awesome. So the last kind of TV-esque poll that we had was another one that you had strong feelings about. Was who was your 90s girl crush from a TV
I am
show?
so disappointed by the results of this.
Yeah. So it was Topanga or Kelly. Topanga from Boy Meets World
Yeah.
or Kelly from Saved by the Bell. Go ahead.
How can you not pick Kelly? All right. I get it. Topanga, and this is my guy side coming out. Topanga is crush material, so I guess that sort of defines the question, that answers the question. She's very girl next door-ish. Whereas Kelly was just the top of the mountain. In high school, if you're watching that and you see the hottest chick in high school, and if you can land that, you are on cloud 9. That's Kelly. Whereas Topanga, especially early Topanga,
she was a nerd.
I mean, no disrespect to anything. I'm not trying to, materialize a woman here. That's not what I'm saying. As my perception back as a kid, they were my age. It's a relatable thing. Topanga was a nerd, so she was quote unquote like reachable in that regard. Like it wasn't. I'm not saying I could date Danielle Fisher. I'm just saying
in the show, her character wasn't like, she wasn't the it girl.
Yes.
But Kelly
She was girl next door.
Yeah.
And then you got to know her and you're like, oh, this is such a good person. This is a sweet person. And you sort of fell in love with the personality first. And then I remember there was, after one season, she super nerded out. And the next she got super hot.
Yeah,
and
she like grew up.
What happened? And I remember that episode, Corey was like, Topanga, summer was good to you.
Right.
And she just, became woman. And I was just, at that aspect, yes. So, but still, there are people today still with the crush on Kelly.
Yeah. I never really watched Saved by the Bell, to be honest. That was not one of my go-tos. But I watch Boy Meets World all the time, so I voted for Topanga.
Topanga, what 91%?
92%.
Yeah, that's disappointing. Look, that's a landslide. That to me is weird. But speaking of Saved by the Bell, we were going to do this poll, but we didn't. Screech or Urkel for nerds?
Well, again, I didn't really watch Saved by the Bell, so I would choose Urkel.
You gotta go Urkel.
Yeah, I mean, that was iconic. Some of his one-liners and exactly. The whole look.
He was supposed to be a one-off.
Oh, really?
The character was. You watch early Family Matters. He's not even on it. And they introduced him. He was supposed to be a one-off.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And he became
a sensation.
Yep.
Like
he defines
overnight.
Family Matters.
But it's one of those curses in the 90s sitcom that you cannot be anything else ever.
Right. He will always be Urkel.
The only people that got out of that were Jennifer Aniston, Will Smith. Really everyone else is defined as that.
Yeah.
Imagine Corey Matthews or Ben Savage.
Yeah.
In a serious role. I mean, I can't take this shit seriously.
Yeah, I know. It's true.
Or Mr. Feeney. I can't take that seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that was it for kind of like the TV polls. Next, we get into music. So these were probably these two polls were the ones that I expected to be the closest or like the most, have the most kind of rivalry. So we did female pop star and we did boy band.
Sure.
So for female pop star, it's Britney or Christina.
Limp Bizkit.
I was waiting for it. Okay, we have to tell this story.
Go ahead.
So a while ago, I don't even remember how we got on the topic, but somehow Adam and I and a group of friends got into a debate about who was more well-known worldwide. Not who sold more albums, not who sold more concert tickets. Who would be more well-known, like name recognition worldwide? Britney Spears or Limp Bizkit?
Limp Bizkit.
And Adam, to this day, thinks that Limp Bizkit is more well-known worldwide. So more people in the world have heard of Limp Bizkit than have heard of Britney Spears.
All right. We have to issue some context here.
Oh, okay.
That might not be true today because of the young people, but at the time in like 2008 when we were talking about
was that long ago?
Yeah. I think that is sincerely true because, hear me out. Again.
This needs to be its own episode.
You see live concert footage of Limp Bizkit in places like Germany and places like, especially in Europe. They sell out I know we're not talking concert tickets. They sell out fields, like giant stadiums. Britney couldn't do that there.
It doesn't matter.
So that means if there are, let's just for the sake of argument, there are 50,000 people in demand to watch Limp Bizkit and a couple of thousand to watch Britney Spears. Who knows who more?
That doesn't mean that more people know who they are. It means more people want to attend their concert.
So that means they know them.
Of course. But how many other tens or hundreds of millions of people know who Britney Spears is, but don't go to her concert.
No, this is very North American of you. You got to think global.
I am, but global.
There are
Britney
stickers
Spears
that say "fuck Limp Bizkit."
Great,
but so
it doesn't
people
matter.
that hate them.
Everybody
make
knows who
merch for
Britney Spears is. Everybody knows who Britney Spears is across all the generations that are living today.
Limp Bizkit.
No. Okay. Anyway,
Everybody
please tell
in the
us
world-
who you agree with.
Everybody is a closet Limp Bizkit fan.
No,
There's-
because for the older a lot of people going back to generations, boomers, traditionalists, we ask grandparents, people in our grandparents' generation, they have no idea who Limp Bizkit is, but I guarantee you they've heard of Britney Spears.
I've said, have you heard
Yes.
of the band Limp Bizkit? And they say yes.
There's a better chance that they have heard of Britney Spears than they've heard of Limp Bizkit.
Bizkit.
Anyway,
Britney versus
this is
Christina.
a decade-long debate. And so finally, I'm glad we finally have this platform to have some more. We've polled all of our friends and family, and hands down, I'm winning.
No, you're
Everyone knows that you're wrong, and Britney Spears is more well known worldwide. But I would like some additional support for my to solidify my win on this. So leave it on our Facebook or anywhere. Just tell us what you think. So the actual debate was Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera, and
This is preference of the two, right? This is not popularity. Who did you prefer?
right. Who was your favorite '90s female pop
It's
star?
Christina. Easy.
Yeah, 58% for Christina. So it was still kind of close.
She's of the two, the one. She obviously had her. I'm not saying she didn't have issues, but she didn't go batshit crazy.
No, that's another reason why I think more people know who Britney Spears
Like
is. But anyway,
Britney Spears went into
she's made headlines for a lot of
into
reasons.
a salon, grabbed a pair of clippers, and just shaved her head.
I know. Yeah, I think for me, I think Britney Spears was more kind of more iconic of the 90s pop star. Like, she is who I think of when someone says 90s pop star.
Well, they're both 80s Mickey Mouse kids.
Kids Club.
Is it Kids
or
Club?
Mickey Mouse Club.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Britney is more of the iconic 90s pop star. But I think Christina Aguilera is a way better singer.
Well, she hit popularity first. Britney did.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember Genie in the Bottle came out after.
They
Hit
were
Me One
very
More Time.
similar timelines,
Yeah.
but it was, I think Britney had a little bit of an edge from that perspective.
Yeah, Christina's definitely the more talented
Yes.
of the two.
But for me, Britney defines the 90s as a pop singer.
But I think when you talk about not entertainment, just in terms of a pure vocal ability, Christina would run circles around Britney Spears.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%.
All right. So I voted Christina. Who won that again?
Christina.
Yeah. All right,
yeah,
good.
probably for that reason.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final poll is like the ultimate 90s rivalry of who is the iconic 90s boy band. Do you have an opinion? I'm curious.
I do.
Do you have a strong opinion?
It's Backstreet Boys or NSYNC.
Yes, Backstreet
It's
Boys are
NSYNC.
Do I even
It's
have to
gotta
say
be
who the
NSYNC.
two choices are?
Yeah, it's NSYNC. It's got to be. Here's why. First of all, the Backstreet Boys, you have a dude, and I don't know his name. From the jump, he looked 40. Like, he didn't look...
Kevin?
Is that him?
Yeah.
He looked so old and so out of place. And he always wore, like, the longest coats, and he was always put
like a
in the
trench
back.
coat.
And he had maybe 5 seconds solo of singing.
Yeah.
In the back. Like, stay in the back, dude. You're just the chaperone. Yeah. Whereas NSYNC defined visually... The 90s a little bit more with the frosted tips, with the weird fucking dreadlock things, with the skunk dreadlock kind of. I don't even know, but you know,
skunk dreadlock.
The guy with a high pitch
from
voice.
NSYNC.
Yeah. He had like the weird haircut kind of thing. Yeah. But the reason why I lean NSYNC is Justin.
Yeah,
he made it. Who's the other one? Aaron Carter. Was he in?
Nick Carter.
Aaron
Carter is his little brother.
Nick Carter was in Backstreet Boys.
But he wasn't the lead of the Backstreet Boys. It was actually Brian Luttrell. Sure. So that's why I think that's funny, because Justin was the lead of NSYNC.
He? I thought it was the other guy.
Who?
I don't know. Who is it? I don't know the names.
No, I think it was Justin.
Was it Justin the lead? I just thought that he was the biggest heartthrob.
I think it was both.
Okay.
But I don't think that was true for Backstreet Boys. I think Brian Luttrell was more of the lead for Backstreet Boys, and Nick Carter was the heartthrob, and he was more popular. I think Nick Carter was the most popular of the Backstreet Boys.
So who am I thinking? JC Chazes?
No, he was not the lead.
He was not the lead? I always thought he was the lead.
No, I don't think so.
Joey Fatone.
Yeah. He
was in like movies, and wasn't he doing cooking?
Yeah. Yep. Pretty recently.
So every one of these guys was like pretty successful, except for Chris, who had the
skunk head.
haircut. Like Lance Bass is doing a lot of good things for gay activism and homosexuality activism. Like that's great. And
what is JC doing?
I don't know. Who cares? But like, I do remember that was a huge culture shock about Lance Bass coming out, and I was just like,
especially after being in a boy band and being like viewed as like his heartthrob and all of that. Yeah,
and I'm like that's pretty fucking cool that you did that and you had the courage to do that. Joey Fatone, he looks like his name should be Joey Fatone,
exactly.
like always. And he looks out of all of them, he is the chaperone. He's the Kevin of NSYNC. Yeah. But he still looks like you want to drink a beer with him.
Right.
Justin's just amazingly talented.
Yes.
And JC was kind of like, yo, I'm in for the ride. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas, like,
like JC was my crush of NSYNC.
Oh, was it?
I always liked him better. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. Whereas the Backstreet Boys, like, I think the Backstreet Boys have more. How do I put this? NSYNC was the more timeless as a group. But I think Backstreet Boys have more timeless songs.
I think Backstreet Boys are more timeless.
Okay.
In general. But I kind of see the distinction.
Like NSYNC is not getting back together.
No.
But Backstreet Boys have.
I just saw them like 3 years ago. They're still touring.
Nick Carter, like whatever.
Well, the NSYNC can't now because JT is off doing his own thing and doing a million things. Like he's
Kevin Richards. Look at him.
I know.
Like he just looks so out of place. Let's look at old 90s pictures. Like, look at this.
Yeah.
I am trying so hard to look so young. And all these other guys are like 12.
Yeah. I have to say, that really was a trip.
I'll buy you beer.
Yeah. Maybe he has the Blockbuster card.
Yeah, he definitely had a Blockbuster card before all of them. Way before.
Yeah, it was definitely a trip going back and looking at all these the pictures for the polls. It was really fun to see all the 90s fashion.
You got this guy with the gold chain. He was
Howie.
like, sure.
Yeah.
Then you got Carter with his oversized sweater and the bowl cut, throwing up deuces.
Why is Brian in a suit?
This guy definitely was the hip hop. Like, I am in touch with hip hop.
AJ.
Here's the chaperone over here with this stupid turtleneck. And the lead guy is wearing a suit.
He's in a suit and tie.
Doesn't make any sense.
I wish people could see the photo we're looking at. We should post it.
None of them. And of course, like you have some of the music videos where they're all in white.
Yeah.
At an airport.
Yeah.
For some like picking up luggage. And they all do.
Oh, we're shitting all over them, but boy bands in the 90s were fucking awesome.
They always do the same move.
But it was great. It didn't matter.
Like,
it did not matter.
Hand to the head, extend out.
Yes, but that in and of itself is iconic. Like it's like its own dance genre was born out of like 90s boy bands.
I know.
You know?
Look at how old he is.
I know. Okay. Yeah, and there were many others. I mean, obviously these were the two these are the two obvious. Yep, 98 Degrees. I mean, Hanson.
LFO.
I still love Hanson to this day. They're still touring. I just saw them last year. But LFO, yep. Mm-hmm.
I don't know the other one.
That was pretty good. I'm impressed. New Kids on the Block.
That's 80s,
it is more 80s. It kind of bled into the 90s.
They were the first.
That's why I think I was never a huge fan because I think I kind of missed it just a little bit. I mean, I was born in 88, so I kind of...
the real first. The Beatles were the first.
Okay, yeah.
But they wrote their own music.
Boy band.
No, they wrote their own music.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the most, I think, probably the most controversial, the one that people probably had the strongest feelings about. And actually, Backstreet Boys won.
That's so
57% to 43%.
So you would say Backstreet Boys have more, obviously, because they're continuing. Yeah. They're persevering even to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And I persevere. How much can you persevere now, really? But would you agree that they have more timeless tracks?
Yes, because I remember things like my favorite NSYNC album was probably Dirty Pop. The one. Do you remember the song?
Okay.
That was the one. I listened to that album all the time, front to back.
My 8th grade girlfriend loved NSYNC. 8th grade girlfriend? What the fuck is that? 8th grade girlfriend loved NSYNC, and she made me listen to the one where there were puppets.
Yes. Okay.
What is that?
No Strings Attached.
Yeah, that had Bye Bye Bye.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be May. This I promise you. All right. She was like, "That's our song."
Oh.
I was like, "Sure."
Yep.
Whatever. But yeah, that's not like maybe Bye 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 and because it's a meme, it's going to be me. But I don't know any of these other songs and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. They're just, it's just weird. I guess, all right, so.
Well, they all sound pretty similar.
Anyways. Yeah, I would say that Backstreet Boys are more of a timeless band, but I think NSYNC, I don't know, they're all the same.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there are people who would disagree with you about that.
Dirty Pop was on Celebrity from what I'm seeing.
Yep.
And again, I don't know any of these other songs. Girlfriend, God, I don't know that.
Yep.
This is like their downfall.
Yeah, I don't know why that particular album, I just remember so vividly listening to it. But otherwise, I was a pretty big Backstreet fan.
I feel like this is when Justin was like, I can do better with it.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Yep. Well, that's it for the polls. Again, there are a lot of other polls I wanted to put up. I wanted to put up Beavis and Butthead versus Ren and Stimpy. I'm choosing Beavis and Butthead all day.
I watched Ren and Stimpy more.
It would be cool if we put WWF versus WCW up there.
Do you remember the Beavis and Butthead, how when everyone for a while walked around with their shirt on their head?
Yeah.
What do you say? I kept cornea. Yeah, that was like such a thing.
Do you know what TP is?
No.
I need TP from my bunghole.
Oh, yeah.
Paper.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I didn't realize that until like later.
Yeah.
I was like,
that's why people call it TP?
Yeah.
That's funny. I never made that connection.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember that line.
Mm-hmm. TP from my bunghole.
Yeah.
That could not be on TV today. Like, what the hell? What are we doing? Mm-hmm. Anyways, anytime they saw like a hot chick, they
oh my God.
On TV.
Yeah. But again, depending on your age, did you really understand?
No idea.
That's what I mean. And I think that's why parents probably had to make some have some discretion with what they let their kids. Like, we watched Ren and Stimpy, and there's so many inappropriate innuendo, dirty jokes that just went right over our head because we were kids. So you got to like find the middle ground, I guess.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. We'll think about it. But again, this was fun because it made me sort of relive things in my childhood, made me appreciate it more. And maybe that's not, that dissimilar to anybody else. If people that grew up in the 80s reminisce about the 80s, they probably love it too. Mm-hmm. We're partial to our generation for sure. Yeah,
I think it's funny how last week on the Generations episode comparing millennials and boomers, we were like the cool young generation talking about it from that perspective. And now we sound so old looking back on our childhood. It's so funny.
But 90s stuff is cool.
It is. Yep.
It's only a matter of time before GIMP is back. Remember slap bracelets and Gigapets.
We didn't even do toys. Furbies, trolls.
Gigapets.
Yeah.
I killed so many Gigapets.
I have to tell this quick story.
Sure.
When I was in elementary school, I lost my Gigapet. And my mom thought that I threw it out in my lunch. And she went to the elementary school.
In the dumpster.
And went in the dumpster to try to find my Gigapet. I will never forget that. That is a mother's love right there.
But you would do it.
100%. Now that I have a kid, I completely understand.
I think I'd just buy a new one
and try to play it off as the old one. Yeah. No, she was legit about it.
Did she find it?
No.
So it's gone.
Yeah.
I remember I had
Never
one.
Never found it
in secret because it wasn't cool for guys to have one, and because it was in secret, I never kept it, took care of it.
Mm-hmm. So it died.
It just died. But I remember, that is the closest thing to AI I feel that I've ever felt.
Yeah.
Having compassion towards something.
Right.
That was
something
a computer.
Not living. Yeah.
And it's, oh God, I just killed. Wait, it's a computer.
Yeah.
But in Mortal Kombat, I'll rip someone's fucking head off.
Fatality.
Yeah. Yeah. And just another day.
Yeah.
He'll come back.
Better luck next time.
He'll come back. Same shit. All right, that's going to do it. Again, if you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe and give us a review, especially if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts. If you do not have a review system in the podcatcher that you are using, I encourage you to head on over to the Facebook and leave us a review there. It would help us out a lot. Help us out to know what kind of content you're looking for, what we need to work on, XYZ. Whatever you can do to put on there would help us out greatly. I should say, not gracefully. Greatly. 5-star review would be preferable, though. Hit us up on Facebook, like I said, facebook.com/whileshe'snapping. Hit us up on Instagram, same thing, @whileshe'snapping. Hit us up on Twitter, @she'snappingpod. And if you want some anonymity and tell us how terrible the 90s were, what we missed, and how terrible hosts we are, you can email us at
whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
And until next week, watch some 90s stuff. Do yourself a favor.
Yep.
Take it easy.
Bye, everybody.